first encountered the Jubilee Center in 1986. I was a graduate student at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. I was taking a course I didn't want to take in Western European politics. I was a political philosophy major, and but I was forced to have a minor in contemporary comparative government. So I did something that a student should never do. I went to my professor and I said, I don't know what to write about. So my professor, Carl Cerny, picked up a newspaper from his desk and he said, write about this. And it was a newspaper from London, and it was talking about the Keep Sunday Special campaign. And I said, fine, I'd be glad to write about this. What makes this so remarkable? And he said it was the only time in the 20th century that a pressure group had actually defeated a three-line whip vote in the parliament. I didn't know what that, I didn't know any of it. And since I know that I botched the language, it's clear that I don't know now. And so I came over to the Jubilee Center and I said I wanted to write a paper, and I met Michael and I met many people at that time, and I found something at the Jubilee Center I had never encountered anywhere else. And you need to know that I attended Wheaton College in Illinois. With Billy Graham being one of our graduates, I'd gone to Gordon Conwell Seminary in Massachusetts, got a master's in church history, got my PhD, but I went to Jubilee Center expecting to find an American, zealous, right-wing, religious organization that was trying to guilt-trip British society into keeping Sunday special. And I got here, and I found people that were more intelligent than any Christian I had met in America, who were motivated, certainly by the gospel, but that they were very sophisticated, they were very smart, and they were more connected to the labor unions than they were to the church, because the labor unions were actually more interested in this than the church. So I wrote my paper, and I received an A, which made me feel good. But when I came back from England, I brought with me two monographs, the first two monographs that were ever written by Michael Suter and Roy Clemens, on the very basis of relational biblical thinking. I had never in my life encountered biblical relational thinking. So from that time, I'd always known that the Jubilee Center was something special. We fast forward to 2003. I think of myself as a nice person. I don't know if you do the Myers-Briggs test here in Britain, but on the Myers-Briggs test I take, and I'm conflict averse, which means that I would rather lie to you than tell you what I really believe, because I want you to like me. And living in New Hampshire in 2003, some events occurred that made it impossible for me to be a nice person. I had taught politics at St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire for 10 years. The New Hampshire primary in the United States in the presidential selection process is the most important part of the presidential selection process. This little state of 1 million people, because we have the first primary, is of great importance. My job at St. Anselm College is to host all the presidential candidates as they came to visit the college over a 10-year period, and also to host the nationally televised debates that were held at our college. And so over these 10 years, I had developed good relationships, not just with, actually, it's impossible to develop good relationships in political campaigns. So I didn't develop good relationships in political campaigns, but I did develop good relationships with the media, and the international media, the national media, and the local media. And I found that most people in the media in the United States are either Catholic or they have no religious persuasion. And so for many of them, I was the only pastor that they knew. So when they had an issue that they wanted to talk about pastorally, they would come to me. And then when issues of religion and politics came up, they'd come and they'd want to talk to me. Now here's my problem. As a politics professor, I can say no comment. And I can dodge issues brilliantly. I'm not saying I can dodge issues in the same way the British can. In terms of the Americans, I'm good. But as a pastor, because along the way I became an ordained minister in the evangelical church, as a pastor I can't say no comment. was the moment in time when I realized that I didn't have the language to communicate what I believed to the culture in which I lived. So it was very clear that I didn't have a language to talk to students. I didn't have a language to talk to culture. And when I looked around at what pastors were offering, everything was either unhelpful. They were either dodging the issue, or they were pretending it was the 1950s and speaking old language that nobody listened to, or they decided that hatred was an effective means of communication and persuasion. So the school gave me a sabbatical, and I decided I needed to get out of the state and the country. And the only place in the world I could imagine that I'd have a chance to try to go and think about these issues was the Jubilee Center in Cambridge. So I wrote to Michael Sluter and asked him if I'd come. And I don't know what possessed him, and I don't think he knows what possessed him, but he said yes. And when I got to the Jubilee Center, it was apparent that Mike was uncomfortable with it, and he wasn't alone. But Mike and the Jubilee Center, and all those associated with it, are committed to Scripture, committed to biblical thinking, committed to teasing out what does the Bible say. And that this was an area, they had done so many different areas, and you all have done groundbreaking work in all over the world, in many different walks of life, and this was an area that hadn't yet been addressed. So Michael said, you can do this, but we reserve the right not to publish this. And so I set out to work, and I worked for 3 years, and I didn't get anything done. Because for 3 years, I realized I did not have the language to communicate with the world and the culture in which we lived. So at the end of the 3 years, Michael knew that his investment was wasted. And he also told me, he said, I don't think you will ever give me a publishable manuscript. And you know, Michael Sluter's way of motivation is a rather singular motivation. But finally what I realized was that in the United States and in Western civilization, we were about to do something that would have been inconceivable for the entire history of the West.